What is up, guys? In today's video, I'm going to be going over some tips for early game in Fortnite. This video is going to focus on Chapter 4, Season 4, but a lot of this will kind of translate to future seasons and future versions of the game. So always, if you guys do enjoy this video, remember to give it a like, subscribe if you like to see more, and comment down below where your favorite place to land has been on the Chapter 4 map. So the first thing we're going to talk about is going to be something that is Season 4 specific, and that is going to be the radio towers, because you can actually see where these spawn before you even jump out of the battle bus. And the radio towers are super helpful this season because this is where you can get slurp juice, and this is where you can get forecast, which will show you where the next zone is for the remainder of the game. And like I said, you can see where the tower spawns before the game even starts. The boss that has the key card won't spawn in until like 30 seconds into second zone, but you can see which towers are in your match or where the towers are in your match before you even jump out of the battle bus, and this may change where you want to land and how you want to play your off-spawn fights. So I have all the tower spawns circled on this map here in the colors to show the spawn locations that share the same tower. Like the blue circled ones will be one of those two. It'll be either be at Frenzy or above Rumble Ruins, and it'll kind of alternate between those spots from game to game, but you won't have a game where it spawns at Frenzy and at the one above Rumble Ruins. It's one or the other. And the same colors are they follow the same pattern. So like if it's circled in the same color, it's going to be, it goes between those two locations, but it's the same tower, and it's never both. It's one or the other between those two locations. And there's 3 towers per game. A blue one is going to spawn, the red one is going to spawn, and the orange one is going to spawn. It just depends on which location, they spawn at. And like I said, this can change how you want to play early game, because if you land Frenzy and the tower isn't there, you're probably going to play differently than if the tower is there, and you may end up not even wanting to land at Frenzy if the tower near you hasn't spawned. So I would highly recommend, checking this out before you jump out of the battle bus. Landing is also something that a lot of people struggle with. There is like a decent kind of knowledge gap to landing in this game because it is weird and it's different from a lot of other battle royales, because in every other battle royale I've played, you jump, and if you don't do anything with your parachute or glider, your character will just hit the ground and then you're like out of the match, But in Fortnite, you get glider locked at a certain altitude or a certain distance to the ground. And this isn't like actual ground. It's just like your character to the nearest piece of ground. So if you glide over a mountain or a tall building or a hill, anything like that, you end up getting glider locked at a certain altitude, or like an altitude earlier than what you would actually want, because your feet are actually, close to the top of that mountain. It makes sense, but it's annoying because once you're glider locked, you can't get unglider locked until you land. So you have to be very mindful of what you glide over, because like I said, if you glide over a high point, you're going to get glider locked earlier, and that's going to just ruin your landing. But also on the flip side, you want to, if you glide over a low point, like let's say water, it counts the ground as like the actual ground underneath the water. So if you dive over water, you can typically get glider locked at a lower altitude than, if you were just gliding over land. And this will affect your landing, because if you get glider locked at a lower altitude, you're, a lower actual altitude because you're gliding over water, you're going to likely be able to hit the ground earlier than other people. And the ideal way to land will vary from POI to POI. It's just something you kind of want to learn as you land at that spot more in general. But diving over water is like a good rule of thumb. You just want to get glider locked at a distance away, like close enough to your POI that you can land there from gliding, but not so early that you land short of your POI. And that's why I said it's like something you kind of got to learn from POI to POI. And as you play the game and get more comfortable at landing at different spots, you'll be more aware of what the ideal things to dive over are. I think a lot of players also struggle because they're like, okay, I'm landing Frenzy. And so they jump out of the bus when it's above Frenzy, and then they just look straight down until they get glider locked. And then they're kind of gliding around in circles, trying, like waiting until they can hit the ground. But if you jump out of the bus a little before Frenzy and then look over like the water, like the little lake that's next to it, then you can, get glider locked and then glide to Frenzy and probably get there better than the person who jumped out of the bus when it was, right above Frenzy and then just look straight down. It's something that's like counterintuitive, and that's why I said it was like somewhat of a knowledge gap, because most people think, okay, I'm going to jump over where I want to land and then I'm going to look right at it and I'm going to get there. But you typically want to jump early and dive over a low point and then glide to where you want to be. Also, if your POI has any like zip lines or extenders, This is mainly going to be in like the jungle, like the extenders, but you can attach yourself to the zip line while you're gliding and then jump off the zip line, and that will kind of cancel your glide effect, and you will typically hit the ground earlier than if you just glided there. And like I already said, because landing can be kind of weird, I think it's best to, get comfortable with a few spots at a time, and then as you get more comfortable with the map, go to more places. But if you just wanted to learn ideal landings, you probably want to stick to like 2 or 3 POIs and really master them. And just for the other aspects of early game, I think it's going to be more consistent if you tend to try to kind of favor a few spots and really learn those POIs rather than landing at a different spot every single game. So that's basically how landing goes. Aim over water, try to jump out of the bus a little before your POI, find those low points, and then glide to the POI. And you should have an earlier landing than a lot of other people once you get that down. This is going to be huge because if you hit the ground first, you're going to be able to loot first. And not only is that going to give you a weapon before other players do, but this might even deter them from just landing on wherever you're landing in general. If you're landing Frenzy Barn and you have a great drop for it, there might be people that would have conned Frenzy Barn that go to like the side barn or like the main house because you had such a good drop. When it comes to where I decide to land at my POI, I like to try to land somewhere like on the edge of the POI or a corner of the POI. That way I'm exposed to less angles. If you land in the center of a POI, then everyone else who lands on the edge of it is probably just going to be looking inward towards you. But whereas like if you land on the edge of the POI, you kind of have to worry about the part of the POI that's in front of you. But like odds are there's going to be an angle that's just kind of nothingness where people are unlikely to land. It's unlikely that people will be there that early in the game. So that's why I like to try to kind of tend to land towards like the edge of the POI or the corners of the POI. And this is true in other games too. Like if you play Call of Duty multiplayer or Halo multiplayer, typically you want to stay on like the edges of the map because that limits your angles of exposure. And it's the same way in like an early game in a BR. You also want to try to be aware of where other players are landing. This can be tough because if you have a really good drop, you're going to hit the ground before them, but you could still just kind of use audio cues to know like, okay, there was a bunch of people to my right. Some people sounded like they were gliding over me. They might be like more ahead, but I didn't hear anything to my left, so there might not be anybody there. Just kind of trying to keep somewhat track of where other players landed at the POI and, where they will be coming from to get to you can be huge because then you can kind of predict if you're going to get third partied. If you land at a house, somebody lands with you, and then you also hear somebody land at the neighboring house, then you can be certain that like probably the moment you finish eliminating that player that landed on you, that other player that landed at the house next to you is going to try to third party. And then also being aware of how many people landed at your POI can also be really helpful. And again, you don't need like an exact count, but you can kind of hear based on how many gliders you hear, like, okay, there's only like 1 or 2 people here. Doesn't mean just ignore everybody. It doesn't mean just like play, really lazy after you get those 1 or 2 kills, but it's worth knowing whether or not your POI was like heavy conned or not really conned much at all. When it comes to weapons, I think you typically want to get close range weapons first if possible. Like if you have the option, I'm going to have a clip here where I have a good drop for this roof. I know other people are going to land on this roof for sure. And there's a sharp tooth shotgun, a twin mag AR, and a chest. And I choose to land on the sharp tooth shotgun, not only because, the shotgun is going to be good for close range. I get that. That's good for me. But also I prevent somebody else from getting it. This other player is going to land on the twin mag AR. I'm able to eliminate them. And then also the reason why I didn't want to go for the chest is if you go for a chest when there's guns on the ground, it takes longer to get that chest loot than it does to just get that guaranteed gun typically. So if you have the option between chest and floor loot, I think typically you're going to want to go for the floor loot. That just makes the most sense to me, especially if you are able to get a close range weapon. That is huge. When it comes to team game modes, I think this should just go without saying, but you would be surprised, or not really surprised if you've played Phil, but you typically want to land with your teammates and also not only just at the same POI, but close enough to help them if, something goes wrong, or to get help from them. If you're landing at Frenzy again, since that's what we've used for example, if you're landing at the main barn or your teammate is landing at the main barn, you probably want to try to land there with them rather than landing at like the house. Because if you have one person land at the barn, one person land at like the big house, you're pretty split, and odds are there's going to be people landing with you. So it's like if you go house and your teammate is barn with people on them, they're either going to have to win that 1v like 2 or 1v3, whatever team game mode it is, before you get to them, or they're going to get eliminated, and then that other team is getting 2 like isolated 2v1s, whatever. So landing with your teammates or landing close enough to be able to help your teammates or receive help from your teammates, I think is huge. Again, that should go without saying, but you guys have played Fortnite, it really doesn't. Another thing that can be helpful for early game is going to be the preferred item slot setting. You can set up which slots weapons will go to once you pick them up. So like, let's say off spawn you get a shotgun, minis, and then an SMG. And if you didn't have this setting on, and you didn't have the auto sort consumables to the right setting on, it would just be set up in the order that you picked it up. So it would go shotgun, minis, SMG, and that can throw people off if they're used to, hitting their shotgun and then swapping once to the SMG. But if you have the preferred item slots and you have shotgun preferred 1, SMG preferred 2, and then heals preferred 3 or whatever, it's going to put shotgun in slot 1, SMG in slot 2. So you're automatically going to have things in the right slot, and it's going to, make it much easier for those early game situations, especially when you don't have much time to sort your inventory out in like a really chaotic situation. Sometimes the auto sort inventory thing is bugged and doesn't work right, but it can be pretty helpful in off-spawn fights because it's typically pretty chaotic and you don't have much time to like reorder things. And then also, I think it's just pretty important to be comfortable with most of the weapons in the loot pool because you don't know what you're going to get off spawn. If, the current shotguns are the Maven, the Infiltrator, and the Pump, and I don't really use the regular Maven or the Infiltrator much at all. I prefer the Sharp Tooth Pump, but I'm comfortable enough with the Maven or with the Infiltrator shotgun that I'm able to use them if it comes down to it off spawn, And then that's how you want to be with the other weapons too. I prefer the Combat SMG, but if it comes down to it, I can use the Burst SMG. If you just never use these weapons at all, or, never even attempt to understand how to use them because you don't like them, that can be fine for most of the game. But early game is, you get a limited amount of stuff and you got to play with what you get, and then it is what it is. But that is going to be it for this video. I hope you guys found this helpful, informative, interesting. Like I said, I did kind of focus on Season 4 stuff at the start with the radio towers, but I also tried to give very broad advice as far as like landing goes, because the map is likely to change next season, and the game is likely to change a lot next season as well. So things are going to be different, but a lot of this will still stand, especially the point about landing and getting glider locked. If you understand that and the other people in your POI don't, you're going to have a huge advantage on them off spawn, and that can be, a few seconds of time that can really make the difference. If you guys found this helpful, informative, interesting, remember to give it a like, comment down below what your favorite POI has been on the Chapter 4 map, and I will see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.